Shalom and welcome to Jerusalem Studio. Recently, U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio laid out the Trump administration's priorities vis-a-vis Iran's nuclear plans. He reiterated Washington's determination to preempt Tehran's quest for weaponizing its enriched fissile material. As for the means towards this end, Rubio reiterated the preference for diplomacy first, but noted that should the negotiations fail, not only nuclear facilities could be targeted, but also the Iranian regime may not survive. Will the Islamic Republic's supreme leader, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, maintain his outward rejection of any diplomatic engagement with the United States, or will he soften his stance and fall to President Donald Trump's demands? Joining us to dissect this matter, all the way from the United States of America, is no other than retired Brigadier General Mark Kimmett, who formerly served as an Assistant Secretary of State for Political and Military Affairs. It's great to see you, General.
No other, Jonathan, no other.
Also joining us here in the studio is our TV7 Editor-at-Large, Mr. Amir Oren. Amir, set the stage for us.
There are several dimensions to the Iranian-American relationship in this preliminary stage of the Trump second term. You have the attacks on the Houthis, which quite expressly are also supposed to convey a message to Iran. As we were starting this conversation, both the State and Treasury departments announced designations regarding 3 officers of the Ministry of Intelligence in Iran. This is separate from the IRGC, but they are also taking part in abductions, and the idea was to try and designate those officers of the regime. One of them used to be the ambassador to Albania. Another is right now the ambassador to Pakistan. And they were part of a group which abducted and probably killed. This is the first time that the administration is now saying that the probable death of former FBI Special Agent Bob Levinson. So we see that the administration does not concentrate only on the nuclear file. As for the nukes, President Trump reached out to Khamenei. He sent a letter to him. The approach was rejected initially, but those quote-unquote moderates in Iran, such as Vice President for Strategic Affairs Javad Ali Zarif, the former foreign minister who had to resign, they were shunted aside. But again, these are only the opening gambits in what can be a very long drawn affair.
A former Minister of Strategic Affairs, since he did resign from that position. General, I'd like to ask you particularly, naturally, during the previous administration, the resolve to ensure that Iran does not acquire nuclear weapon capabilities was stated time and again, but unfortunately in the field, and the figures that have been seen and also published by the International Atomic Energy Agency have indicated that Iran has managed to really rush towards levels of enriched material and that go beyond what any country requires for civilian purposes. To what degree is there a shift in this administration to ensure that not only it does not reach that level of no return, but also ensure that it is brought to heel and taken back to the points where it cannot yet again accumulate the various materials required to attain nuclear weapon capabilities?
Yeah, well, first of all, I think that this administration is under the assumption that the Iranians have already crossed that threshold, as has been stated a number of times by Benjamin Netanyahu. I think that you see the playbook being worked out. Start off with an offer of peace and talks. the note in March that was sent by President Trump through the United Arab Emirates, and their foreign minister Gargash personally delivered it to the Ayatollah, where he instantly rejected it, is step one. Step two is some pronouncements on the part of our national security officials. And recently, Mike Waltz on Face the Nation 3 days ago said, we not only demand that they end their nuclear program, but they disassemble their nuclear program, that they unwind it. Obviously, the Iranians are not going to take well to that. I think the Iranians are still believing that President Trump is someone who's never started a war. He only ends wars. But I think in this case, there will be an exception. So I think we will see this play out over the months ahead. And one thing we should note about President Trump is he accelerates the timelines for decisions. He is already putting effort and increasing the pressure on the Houthis, blaming it on the Iranians. He's reached out to the Russians for their help, and I think he's going to trade Russian help for land in Ukraine. But it's very, very clear that there is momentum within this administration that is going to move to a decision by Iran to either talk about their program or alternative methods are going to be used by the United States.
Mr. Owen, when we're looking, though, at the technical, there are technicalities that are usually brought out, and then the Iranians are very sensitive to the various statements and the technicalities within the processes. But if you really look at the timeline and what the United States is doing under President Trump, which General Kimmich just laid out before us, he is taking out every point of leverage that the Iranians have. If before we thought, post the Israeli strike of October the 26th, that the Iranians are naked, now they're going to be really naked. Not only naked, but also broke, with the maximum pressure campaign being very effective to this point in time, and still many weeks ahead, it's only going to get worse.
Yes, the administration is saying not even one drop of oil should go to clients such as China, and the Chinese companies and port facilities have been sanctioned, those taking part in trying to bypass the boycott on Iranian oil. And some 10 days ago, the deputy or vice foreign ministers of China, Russia, and Iran met in Beijing and issued a joint communique in which China and Russia supported Iran in the call to get back to the JCPOA, which of course China and Russia have been parties to, along with the United States and several European entities. And one interesting point there was that the Russians called on Iran to foreclose the idea of nuclear weapons once and for all. So again, this is a negotiating tactic. The Iranians always portray themselves as the aggrieved party, going back to Mossadegh in the 1950s, and then the American support of the Shah, which of course Khomeini toppled. And they want assurances from the United States that they will not try to act against the regime, as Marco Rubio indicated, that it will not stop at hitting the nuclear infrastructures. The regime itself might be the target. So we see here negotiations without calling them negotiations because it's in public. We haven't seen yet what happened some 13 years ago when Bill Burns conducted secret talks in Oman.
Indeed. Well, also the three countries you refer to, Iran, China, and Russia, when they met actually at the deputy foreign minister level, following which they provided this communique also to the Board of Governors of the International Atomic Energy Agency. And subsequently, they held also a broader meeting under the auspice of Chinese state counselor or foreign minister Wang Yi, during the course of which it was a charade of anti-Western and anti-American condemnations and, a lot of rhetoric coming out of there.
This is par for the course.
Which also stems from the fact that the United States and the Senate right now are very vigorous in enforcing the maximum pressure campaign, including against China, which enjoyed roughly 90% of oil exports from the Islamic Republic of Iran, and much of the ramifications of this maximum pressure campaign are also pinned on both Russia and China. So, General, when we're looking at this trilateral alliance of those three countries that are not historically aligned, but nonetheless have a common adversary that they seek to confront, to what degree can we expect a certain double down from the Western part to say we are one side versus the other, because it seems like the West is splintered in this regard?
Well, I really don't think so. The maximum pressure campaign has, up to this point, been a sort of maximum pressure campaign. The United States has not really taken off the gloves. And taking off the gloves would be blockading the Persian Gulf, the Arabian Gulf, and not permitting Iran to allow their tankers to leave to supply China. China would feel it. Certainly Iran would feel it. That's why the Iranians, in my estimation, started putting those missiles on the Thumb Islands. Second, perhaps I may be too hopeful, but it would seem to me that the United States is trying to achieve a grand bargain in the region that goes well beyond the region. In the discussions with Russia, perhaps trade a little bit of land in Ukraine for assistance with Iran, but more importantly, try to drive a wedge between Russia and China. Not only that, but double down on the Abraham Accords to try to bring stability into the region. And in doing so, that also means that Russia helps us with the Iranian nuclear program. That is possible. That takes deft diplomacy. That takes a certain amount of strategic thinking. It sort of reverses what Kissinger did in '72, but this may be the time to do it. Now, of course, everybody in the United States that publishes in the newspapers doesn't believe this administration has that level of strategic thinking nor diplomatic finesse. But I've been impressed with Steve Witkoff to this point, and even though he's taking a lot of grief, the signals I'm seeing is that he is perhaps trying to achieve this grand bargain.
Absolutely, and it does seem quite evidently that this administration is pursuing a Kissingerian approach on the global stage, with actually President Trump, before being elected, hiring the Kissinger Associates firm, consultancy firm, and utilizing them to establish the strategy on America's foreign policy from a America First perspective. But nonetheless, we do see that there are various complexities on a regional angle. There are many concerns, particularly also in Gulf states, of the ramifications that may evolve out of such a potential kinetic strike against Iran's nuclear infrastructure. Do you see their preparations right now underway, since we do see a lot of firepower, 3 aircraft carriers, 2 of which are en route to the Red Sea, one almost here? Give us a little bit of sense. To what degree is this now also sending that significant signal necessary to convince the Iranians?
Yes, there are several carrier task forces on the way. One, the Truman, is already here. The other one is on its way from the Indo-Pacific. But this is not really convincing the vulnerable Gulf states, because they understand that they will bear the brunt of Iranian retaliation. The Iranians cannot hit the American mainland. They may try to hit American bases such as Al Udeid in Qatar or the Fifth Fleet in Bahrain, but it is much more cost effective for the Iranians to try and hit the Saudis and others, which is why Saudi opinion would be very important for U.S. decision makers before they go on an attack on Iranian nuclear targets. Of course,
For the sake of our viewers, why attack Saudi Arabia? Didn't they reach an arrangement together with the Chinese?
Yes, but it's reversible, of course. These are shifting sands. We are in the Middle East, and yesterday's partners are today's enemies, and then tomorrow perhaps allies. The Saudis cannot count on any outside help, even though, of course, the integrated air and missile defense is the main effort of CENTCOM. And there have been improvements in that. But nevertheless, the Saudis are as exposed as the Iranians, even though the Iranians have suffered in October their air and missile defense system being peeled off by the Israeli Air Force.
General Kimmett, on the one hand, the United States is pounding the Houthis very hardly, but very hard, excuse me. But at the same time, we're seeing the Iranians trying to somehow rein in Hashd-e-Shaabi in Iraq, the Popular Mobilization Forces, so-called, out of which roughly 46 militias are loyal to the Islamic Republic, and they sent their RGC Quds Force commander, Khani, for a couple of meetings just a couple of days ago. And we see also the United States, on the other hand, stating quite clearly that they expect the Iraqi government to rein in the Hashd-e-Shaabi and ensure that the one leading is the Prime Minister Mohammed al-Shia al-Sudani, excuse me.
Yeah, clearly, one of our red lines remains that weapons should be, and the use of force should be, singularly under the control of the leader of the country. Shia al-Sudani has a tough point because, again, I think it's important to understand that the militias inside of Iraq have a special status, primarily because they were the first on the battlefield to push back ISIS. Most are criminal organizations. Most are trying to shake down businesses. Most are trying to create their own businesses. But there will be some time before he can totally convince, particularly the framework political party, that it is time to demobilize the militia. I would go back to a point, though, that was made by Amir, which is that somehow we quickly leaped from negotiations to military actions and talked a little bit about the maximum pressure campaign. But as I said, we've got a minimum pressure campaign right now. There's still a lot of opportunities to put our hands around the neck of Iran before we start putting warheads on foreheads. We really haven't choked them off as much as could be. And quite frankly, if we can get the Russians to help us with that, I think that would be the last step needed, with some additional action on the part of the United States to really have a sanctions regime which will work against Iran and possibly change their behavior and bring them to negotiations. I think people are too quick to pull out the pistol and actually suggest that it's time to make the penultimate attack into the Iranian nuclear facilities. But we'll see. One thing I will tell you is that President Trump is genetically reluctant to start wars and predisposed to making a deal. So he'll wait till the last minute before he decides to use military force. He's not afraid to use it, but I think he's going to try to make a deal. And when that deal fails, then he'll use military force, but not before then.
The fact of the matter is, though, the longer we wait, the shorter of a window of opportunity there is to confront Iranian breakout, which naturally is becoming shorter and shorter as time progresses. Secondly, the Iranians are not just sitting idly by, and we're seeing just in the last 4 days, the Iraqis coming out and saying that Iraqi oil tankers, supposedly captured by NAVCENT, the naval component of the United States Central Command, were actually Iranian oil tankers guised as Iraqi oil tankers. So the Iranians are trying to break free from the maximum pressure campaign with all kind of ruses and other aspects. So to what degree, General Kimmett, can we expect there to be a double down on enforcement before even reaching the point of establishing potentially a blockade on the strategic Strait of Hormuz?
Well, again, I agree with your term doubling down, and it would appear that this administration is doubling down not only on the military operations against the Houthis and elsewhere, but they're doubling down on their clear messages that they're sending to Iran. But as to your earlier point about breakouts, I was the planner at CENTCOM in 2006, and even back then we were convinced that the Iranians were only an inch away from breakout, and I think that we've been saying that for almost 20 years now. The one thing I think is certain, that if, unlike the North Koreans, if the Iranians were to announce tomorrow that they've achieved a nuclear capability, unlike North Korea, as I said, I think that we would take action, a collective action, to reverse that breakout, reverse that capability in a way that we're unwilling to do with North Korea because of its proximity to Seoul, which they could take out with conventional weapons and didn't need the nuclear capability.
Sterling?
2 points to bolster Mark Kimmett's point. One is that the administration has delegated more authority to the CENTCOM commander, General Kurilla. He doesn't have to go through micromanagement through the Secretary of Defense and the President on every single action. Now, of course, going to war against Iran is not going to be left to the commander on the scene, but his status now is much more significant than it used to be under the previous administration. Another point is that there are events which can take place unexpectedly and force decisions. Should one American anywhere be killed because of Iranian action, President Trump will order a major retaliation. Whether it will be against the Iranian oil industry or even the nuclear infrastructure remains to be seen. But you know, General McKenzie, who used to lead CENTCOM, said that after Qasem Soleimani was killed, there was this notion that the Iranians notified the Americans that they are going to hit back at Al-Assad air base in Iraq so that there will be no casualties. He said it's wrong. They wanted to kill Americans, and there would have been retaliation under the previous Trump administration in 2020. Eventually, only concussion were suffered by the U.S. servicemen. But it's always touch and go when there is action and Americans die.
There is a very significant difference, though, between the 2019 strike and today, since today the Iranians are, again, they're naked. Hezbollah, which was their most potent force, is not there anymore. Their Liwa Zainibiyun, Liwa Fatimiyun, all the various militias in Syria are not there anymore. The Houthis are being suppressed very significantly, and we're seeing just in the last 24 hours additional tribes taking more of a proactive stance against the Houthis.
But that's our calculus. Is it theirs too?
I believe it is. And I believe it is because I've been following them now for quite some time obsessively. And we're seeing the manner in which they are trying to hedge themselves, but they are afraid. And within that context, General Kimmett, a wounded beast ultimately can lash out in every direction. What is the most important focus? And we don't have very much time left for this, roughly 1.5 minutes. What is the most important focus that you could recommend leaders watching right now have in the context of the Iranian file?
Well, it's very simple. Number one, you continue to use negotiations and coalition building until that no longer is a fact, that won't change the behavior of the Iranians. And then number two, don't let the beast get wounded. You make sure that when you go in, you kill it, you don't wound it.
Mr. Owen?
Yes, of course, I agree with General Kimmett. And as he mentioned, he was there at CENTCOM in the first decade of this century. They were at the time in a better position than they are now because Iraq has just been conquered. Saddam Hussein was no longer there. And right now, while they have their malign activities in the region, they don't have many allies. Not only those you mentioned, which were supposed to deter Israel or hit it in this ring of fire. But look at the world. Yes, China and Russia support them in the Security Council. But should there be a war, they know that they will be defeated.
Absolutely. Well, this is all the time that we have for today's edition. Therefore, I'd like to immediately thank Brigadier General Mark Kimmett for all of your valuable insights. I'd like also to thank Mr. Amir Oren, of course.
Thank
you. I'd like to thank all of you at home as well. Until our next edition, from here in Jerusalem, Shalom. The Middle East, home to the cradle of civilization, retains a reputation from time immemorial as one of the most complex, conflict-ridden regions of the world. A cluster of nations, religions, powers, and influences, Mideast intricacies pose conundrums to even the most astute individuals. Bombarded daily, indeed every minute, by a barrage of information, some accurate, yet most of it less so, TV7 Israel invites you to watch and hear some of the most knowledgeable experts, most of whom partook in creating policies shaping this region today. Join us for Jerusalem Studio every Tuesdays and Fridays for content that truly matters.